Good evening, everyone. It is January 11th, 2023. Welcome to the Warrant Committee. Madam Secretary, would you please announce who we have present by way of in-person and by Zoom?
Certainly. Tonight we have present Jay Funling, Judy Steele, Amanda Serio, Allison Gagnon, Lori Connolly, Thomas Caldwell, Lorraine D., Kristen Posiel, Stephen Geister, CJ O'Connor, Emily Cavalier, and Dave Humphries.
Thank you. The main item on our agenda tonight is going to be discussion of proposed Article 2 for our special town meeting, which will be germane to the town treasurer collector position. To present that article to us, I'm going to ask the town administrator, Nick Milano, to come and to present the article formally to us, and he's going to give us an update with regards to the questions that we had with regards to Article 3, the proposed purchase of the 930 Brook Street property. Nick, would you please? Thank you.
Sure. Good to see you all again.
Hi, sorry, this is Jay. Can I interrupt? I can't see anything. I don't know if Lorraine can see anything.
She can't hear anything either.
I don't think we show anything yet. We haven't shared.
I don't know if Milton Access TV can see. I guess they're the ones that count.
See what?
So you should
Open
open
that.
that one, show the room.
Yeah, but it should be.
Yeah, I'm only seeing the Zoom participants myself.
Sean. Video on
I can't hear anybody. Has the meeting started?
Zoom. Is it unmuted?
I know I can't hear anybody though.
It's not like 3 years.
Yeah, I think it'd be like,
I thought it was funny.
Okay. That's a good one. Technology.
what did we do in the old days? We'd all be here.
Oh. I just was gonna send them an email to say that they're working on it.
Says a lot of panels to start video. I don't understand.
There we are.
Can you see that?
That's good. Just to check, nobody on the Zoom can hear this? Oh, you can? Okay, so Jay can hear this. Nobody else? Lorraine, can you hear this? Hello?
I'm good here.
Okay, that's
This is
good.
Judy.
Okay, can you see anything, or is it just audio?
No, I can see the blue room and the participants
Okay.
now.
Okay,
Yes.
all right, we should be
It's
good.
gotta be Judy's.
Sorry about that, everybody.
I mean, Lorraine's thing.
Okay.
Lorraine, I don't know what's going
We want to get back to the meeting, I guess.
And I'll email Lorraine to make sure she can, since she was the only one we didn't hear from. Oh, she just.
That's weird. Go ahead. I don't know. The everyone else can.
Maybe she should log off and try to log back in.
Possibly.
Yeah.
The general rule is always restart your computer first.
Just reboot.
Oh yeah, there we are. So. Okay. Sorry about that, everybody.
As I was saying, good to see you all again. So we, select board met last night in executive session to pick up the conversation about the potential purchase of the Fauntmont Convent. We had not and have still not received any additional information from the Sisters of St. Joseph at this time. Just a reminder where we're at in the process. We received a proposal from them in December. December 21st, the select board made an offer back to the sisters, and we're waiting a response to that now. So there is no additional information from our conversation on Monday. I apologize that we don't have anything for you.
No apologies are necessary. I mean, it's part of the process. Thank you for that update.
Sure.
So what's this Article 2?
Okay, so I'll run through just to reframe the conversation about Article 2 quickly, and then I'll step aside and let everybody else here chime in. So just to recap the proposed article, see if the town will vote to change the town treasurer collector from a position elected under MGL Chapter 41, Section 1 to a position appointed by the town administrator under MGL Chapter 41, Section 1B and Chapter 65 of the Acts of 2016, and further to amend the general bylaws if necessary to accomplish the purposes of this article. As I mentioned last time, I did have the full text of that statute, but essentially the two components is that Chapter 41, Section 1B provides the process for communities to transition from elected positions to appointed. 2 steps, town meeting vote at least 60 days before the annual town election. I ran through this again on Monday, but there are 3 potential outcomes. Special town meeting might vote against it. Town meeting could approve, and the question could pass in April, in which case, if a candidate runs for treasurer and is elected, that person will serve until a permanent appointment is made. And then the 3rd outcome is what has happened here in Milton previously, where a special town meeting could vote to approve it, but the question may not pass, in which case the elected treasurer shall serve a full term. In terms of trends, I pulled some information from the Massachusetts Division of Local Services at the end of December. 47 municipalities out of 351 have elected treasurers. If you look at communities that are a little bit larger, over 10,000, 15 out of those 180 have an elected treasurer. Here's a list of the 15 that do have an elected, and I can distribute this after. I added some notes just to give a sense of what's happening in a few other communities. In November, the city of Holyoke was considering a ballot question to make this change. I put Milton on this list here. Belmont has a special town meeting scheduled for the end of January with a ballot question in April. Ludlow actually on Monday night voted on this to approve it. It'll appear on their annual town election in March. Westwood's taken a slightly different tack. They had a charter review committee recommend to make this change. They have both an elected treasurer and an elected collector. They are moving to make both positions appointed, and they're gonna do that through special legislation, so that'll be a town meeting vote at their annual town meeting in May, and then they'll submit that special legislation up to the legislature, so they won't be going to ballot, the town meeting and ballot vote step. So just want to provide a little context as to what other communities are doing here in Massachusetts. The one that I found most recently to change was Rehoboth, which did so at the end of last calendar year, and they had done the special legislation route as well. So just in terms of a little bit of background to this change, so this making these positions appointed is routinely cited by the Department of Revenue, Division of Local Services as a best practice. Their general guideline is that elected officials should be those who make policy and advisory recommendations, and that for operational positions, they should be appointed officials. So the other things I point to is that you can potentially attract a broader pool of applicants, whereas anybody could apply to this position. An elected official has to be a resident of Milton. You can have certain things to screen applicants to try to attract a higher quality of candidate. So this is just a quote that I thought helped kind of frame where the Division of Local Services comes on this issue, that unlike policy-making positions, typically boards and committees, the treasurer and collective positions require specific skill sets, and the appointment process expands the pool of potential candidates with the experience and qualifications critical to the position. Lastly, and I know that Rick and Leroy will talk about this, that Milton had a financial management review done by the Division of Local Services in 2013. Their recommendations included more centralized management overall, especially in the financial departments, and a consolidated financial department, and the Town Government Study Committee, which they can speak to much better than I can, had included this as one of their recommendations as well. So I think just want to try to help frame the conversation there. I think the last thing I wanted to say is it's been a pleasure to work with Jim. He is retired. It's this whole conversation, I think we can all agree, is not about Mr. McAuliffe in any means. It's more about what would be next. So I just wanted to make sure that folks understood that our perspective on this and the comments that we're making are about looking forward and not intended to be taken about anybody in the position now. And if there was no retirement coming, we wouldn't be having this conversation either. So I just wanted to make that statement too. With that, I can take any questions if there are any at this point, or just turn it over to other folks.
Question, who would appoint the position?
This position would be appointed by myself, the town administrator, as the other department heads are currently. The department heads under the select board.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. Can I ask a question?
Yeah, we have hands up. Judy has one too. Yes, please, Jay.
I'm sorry, no, Judy can go first, please.
Oh, thank you, Jed. So my question goes to the presentation, one portion of which is that we would have a broader pool of candidates to choose from. In my looking at several other towns that have gone this way, we pay our town treasurer just a hair over 100,000. In many of the towns that have an appointed position, the salaries are much higher, moving into the mid 100s. So that's a significant, it's a noticeable increase in having this move money-wise. So the question goes to this. It appears to draw a good candidate pool. We are going to have to throw some money at that to sort of, the most qualified of candidates would be looking at monetary compensation as well as working conditions, I imagine. So can you answer that, Mr. Milano, how you would see that unfolding once we go to an appointed position in regards to compensation for this position to the candidate chosen?
Sure. I think it's a really important question because financial minds working in municipalities is a challenge that all municipalities are facing right now. A corollary is the fact that the town looked to hire its town accountant and finance director, posted the position in April, and when I arrived in September, the position was still unfilled. And we reposted it, re-advertised, pushed out to my network, and we had 2 applicants, one of whom was from a much smaller community, 3 applicants rather, one of whom was from a much smaller community, and one of whom lived on one of the 2 islands off the coast of Massachusetts. So I think it's an issue that we're facing broad strokes in Massachusetts in terms of attracting folks to come into work in the municipal finance field. I think it's unfortunate because I think they're good jobs, good work-life balance, they pay pretty well, it's interesting work, but that's on us to recruit people into this world. But I think the salary question would apply, in my view, whether it's elected or appointed. Somebody would have to run for elected office, and if they work in finance today, it's probably a pay cut, and now you're asking them to run for office on an annual basis. So I think the salary question is not an easy conversation, but I think it applies whether it's elected or appointed in terms of having a job that people will be attracted to. That said, we've done some salary surveys. I think we're not extremely far out of the range. The town of Needham is advertising right now, and they're advertising about where this position in Milton pays currently. And Needham is pretty comparable in a lot of ways to Milton. They have a little bit more industry, but it's something we've looked at and we will consider as this goes forward.
Matt, just a quick follow-up to that. If you have to go higher than the current rate of salary we have, would that need approval, or is that sort of a financial decision that the town administrator makes?
So a salary line, the salary for all positions in the town government are included as part of the budget. So that would have to be included in throughout the budget making process. And if there is a change in the salary, it'll have to be proposed through that process, which the warrant committee certainly plays an integral role in.
Thank you.
Jay,
Hello. My question is, when we looked at this 5 years ago, we were discussing both having the appointed treasurer and then having a town CFO as a new role, and that person would oversee the treasurer. So are we still talking about that being a new role, or are we saying that is the role that Amy Dexter is filling now, and this person would report to Amy Dexter, and not adding another body?
So for right now, I would say the latter, Jay, because we would be, under that proposal, we would be adding one full new FTE to the town financial departments. I'm not in a position to make that request right now. I think if you look at the warrant report from back in October 2018, it indicated that this was the first step in a process towards getting to a department that might look like that. I think that would still be potentially a long-term goal, but it's not something we're making a request to now. So we would have a finance director / town accountant, Amy Dexter, who her job description includes overseeing the financial departments, as well as a treasurer, a chief appraiser, the staff in her office in the town accountant's office as well. So yes, that was part of the conversation. I think it's still part of the conversation we should have long-term about the town of Milton's organizational setup, but it's not something that we're requesting at this time.
are there any other questions for the town administrator? Thank you.
You're welcome. I'll be here.
At this time, we've asked Mr. McAuliffe and Mr. Walker and Mr. Neely to address us. Maybe you could all three come up and sit in that. I know that Mr. Walker has a presentation, so maybe we could lead off with his presentation. But then hopefully we can have a conversation about your perspectives and recommendations to us. So Mr. Walker, welcome.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Ready to roll?
We are ready to roll.
First slide, please. So what I wanted to do is summarize, once again, this is a presentation that I delivered to town meeting in 2018 on behalf of the Town Government Study Committee. And what it does, and we'll do this evening, is summarize the work that we did and the important findings that came out of that. So we used 4 approaches. We surveyed other municipality financial management structures. We looked at various towns, and I'll give you a list of those in a minute. And we looked at how their finance and finance departments were structured. We interviewed a range of municipality officials. We talked with a list of Milton key stakeholders, and I'll show you that list in a minute as well. And we did a review of the statewide information and trends provided by the Mass Department of Revenue. And as Town Administrator Milano said, we referred in large part to the financial management survey that the DLS Department of Revenue did for us. Next slide. This research was carried out over a 3-year period, and we talked with 23 municipalities. We either surveyed them directly or interviewed officials in those towns. Those were Brookline, Lexington, Dedham, Wellesley, Winchester, Swampscott, Stoughton, Belmont, Canton, Norwood, Needham, Concord, Sharon, Norwell, Sudbury, Andover, Hingham, Westwood, Ludlow, North Attleboro, Rockland, Arlington, and Burlington. Next slide, please. And then based on all of that, we saw some trends that I think are important to consider as we consider this question once again. The first was that 79% of the Massachusetts municipalities at the time had appointed treasurers. That was, as you saw in Nick's presentation, there are 351 cities and towns in Massachusetts, so 79% of those municipalities had appointed treasurers, and of the 74 municipalities that had elected treasurers, only 24 of those had populations above 10,000. The trend obviously was the larger the municipality, the more likely it was that they had an appointed treasurer. And when we did a separate cut of the data and looked at operating budgets between 50 million and 200 million, 90% of those municipalities had appointed treasurers. So you see the trend developing. Next slide. So what do we conclude from all of this information that we gathered in these interviews? One was that there was a clear affirmation of the importance of an organizational structure where there was a lead finance individual. That could have been a CFO, finance director, assistant town administrator for finance, but someone who had oversight of all of the different financial functions was important. And at the time, Arlington was considering voting to move to an appointed position, and they did. No identified instances of conversions the other way. So based on that 3-year period of research, we didn't find any instances where towns went the other way, that they had an appointed treasurer and then subsequently decided to go to an elected treasurer. Next slide. So what we concluded, and Nick alluded to this a moment ago, that if we're looking for a CFO or a finance director, that recruiting an individual that would be willing to oversee all of that without having that treasury function there was unlikely, and that a consolidated financial management structure would enhance what we saw as cross-training opportunities and career advancement opportunities. So with a larger organization there's more opportunity to have individual cross-train and perhaps move up within the organization. Next slide. So as I said, these are the stakeholders that we talked to, members of the audit committee, town auditors, the board of selectmen, which is now the select board, and those were individual discussions with each member at the time, town administrator, the town treasurer, the town accountant, the Milton Public Schools superintendent, the chair of the school committee, the assistant superintendent for business at the Milton Public Schools, the warrant committee chair, and the town moderator. Next slide, please. So what did we hear from those individuals? And this is a difficult conversation to have, and Nick alluded to this as well. It's a difficult conversation to have when you have an incumbent treasurer, because you want to be as careful as possible not to make the discussion about the incumbent treasurer, my friend Jim, but about the structure and what might benefit the town the most. But what I will say is, when we had these private conversations, individuals were very forthcoming about what they thought could be improved and should be improved. So here's what we heard: that there would be increased cooperation, that the idea there was when you have someone who's separate from the rest of the financial management structure, and the decision about whether to cooperate is theirs. So sometimes they may cooperate, sometimes they may not, but since they're not part of the financial management structure and they're not part of the reporting structure, that's a choice they make. So what we heard from people is they were certain that there would be increased cooperation. Next, and probably more important, was improved coordination. That was with regard to short-term financial planning, audit responses, audit recommendation implementation, and coordination between payroll, accounting, treasury ops, human resources functions. And again, that was complicated by the fact that you had an independent treasurer who had a choice about whether and when they were willing to get involved, cooperate. And what I heard from these individuals, this long list of people, including Jim, we talked to Jim as you saw, was that there was a clear sense that cooperation and coordination would both be improved. Next, that a qualified CFO or finance director would improve financial management practices and discipline. So this is the discussion that often occurs every time a town considers this question, and that is, with an elected treasurer, there's no requirement for qualifications. It's who gets the most votes. That could be because they're popular, could be because they're qualified. Over the last 20 years, the two incumbents, Kevin Sorgi was a police officer. Jim, I believe, was a real estate agent. He can correct.
I was treasurer of the labor union.
Okay, treasurer of the labor union. And when we looked at what we considered to be essential qualifications for a treasurer, it was someone with a depth of experience in treasury operations, in investment management, in cash management, and those are qualifications that you may or may not get with an elected treasurer. So the sense was that someone who came in with those qualifications or was recruited with those qualifications would improve financial management practices and discipline, important when you're making multi-million-dollar decisions. Second, or third, fourth, we heard that there would be more consistent accountability across the financial management team with the treasurer as a direct report. Improvement in the quality of the capital planning, bonding, and management of debt service. Debt service, as you know, bond issues and debt service are some of the most important financial decisions that the town makes, and more importantly, they're multi-million-dollar decisions. So millions of dollars can be saved, millions of dollars can be lost based on the quality of the decisions there. And again, the thought was that someone who had that experience would probably be better at making a higher quality decision there. Similarly, thinking about what the midterm and long-term revenue strategies are for the town, and again, being a part of a financial management team that did that planning and made those decisions. So the idea is the team does the planning, the team does the execution, rather than an individual who's independent. And as I said, they make the decision about whether they cooperate. That the sense was that with a cohesive financial management team, again, that the quality of that planning would be improved. And then finally, long-term financial planning and forecasting. I want to do a commercial here. This is something that I've been talking with the town a lot. If you're a town meeting member, you've heard me say before the importance of having a financial plan. We have had one. I'm entirely sure we have one now, but we need one badly as an overarching strategy for how we make these decisions about bonding, about all of these important financial management decisions that we make. So that was the stakeholder feedback that we heard. And then lastly, I just wanted to do an update. Nick did this as well, but as of 2018, the slide you see on the screen was that there were 24 towns with populations at least 10,000 and above who had an elected treasurer. Since that time, Burlington, Gardner, Meanfield, Lakeville, Marlborough, Pepperell, Rehoboth, Webster, and Westport have all gone to an appointed treasurer. And Belmont has a select board forum next week, January 19th, on this very question. Holyoke has a ballot question under discussion, and Whitman as an appointed treasurer on the May 2023 budget or ballot. So these are things that towns are talking about. I would close with two things though. All of this information certainly suggests that some towns think this is a good idea, but some people would say, well, so what? We're Milton, we don't have to do things just like everyone else, we can do things differently. And the argument is and was that the treasurer should be independent and accountable to the voters, and that you get a better quality decision making there. I think I would strongly and respectfully disagree with that. I think that the notion that the treasurer is accountable to the voters would be true with politicians who you can check their voting records, you can check the positions that they take, and you're right, I'm accountable to the voters, and if you don't like the decisions that I've made and the positions that I've taken, you can vote me out the next time. With the treasurer, there's not that kind of transparency, unfortunately. They're making day-to-day decisions that nobody sees. And frankly, the taxpayers don't have the time, or in some cases, the expertise to hold that individual accountable. It's a much better model when you have them as part of an organization structure where they're accountable to a lead finance individual. So I think as we think about this, I'll just relate the sequence of events the last time. We talked to the Warrant Committee. The Warrant Committee approved the article and the proposal. We talked to town meeting. They approved the article and the proposal. And the ballot question failed. And I think the ballot question failed. Actually, take a look at the letter that Jim wrote to the Milton Times. That kind of summarizes what the arguments were. And I think the challenge for us this time, fortunately, with hope, as Jim was vacating the seat, the challenge that we have this time is to help people understand how important and critical this position is, and how much of a financial impact it has in the decision that it makes for the town. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
Well, just a little brief on it.
Sure. Thank you.
I've always fought elected positions. And a little background, I have a degree in accounting from Suffolk. I was a treasurer for labor union for 10 years. I was an employee of the Globe for 26 years. I was in collections, national advertising. I am, and also, I'm a real estate broker, real estate appraiser, auto dealer appraiser. So I have a fairly good background coming into this job. I've been the treasurer now for 14 years. Since I got here, we got a AAA rating for the first time ever. We are one of the top collectors in the state as far as real estate taxes. We have one of the best rates. Just going over, and Judy stole my thunder. Thank you, Judy. At appointed positions, you're looking at Brookline, they pay $121,000. Dedham pays $115,000. Wellesley's $116,000. Canton $152,000. Attleboro's $107,000. Arlington will pay $145,000. Burlington's $123,000. So they do, other towns that appoint people do pay quite a bit, and they have to. I mean, right now, there's about 30 treasurer jobs in the state of Massachusetts that are open. And take, for example, Arlington. Arlington went to an appointed treasurer because Steve Gilligan, who was a long time the treasurer of Arlington, retired. And he couldn't get anybody to step up and run for that position. Since Arlington went to an appointed position, they're going on the 5th treasurer since 2017. The town of Milton had 5 treasurers in the last 90 years. So they've had a pretty good success rate of, when you get an elected official in this town, they stick around and do the job. As far as cooperating, in my position, we cooperate with every department every day. Every department has to come to my office once a day to do turnovers. If they need help, they're gonna get help. I work very closely with the health department. on a lot of issues. The assessor's office, I mean, I talk to the assessor 3, 4, 5 times a day to help him out. And we do have a new assessor, he appreciates my input on a lot of the stuff. I mean, I've worked with Amy Dexter for years. I've been here through four town administrators, 4 town accountants. I can't tell you how many boards I've been. So I mean, the town treasurers, the previous town treasurers, Kevin Sorgi, was there for 29 years. And we had the fiscal management report, which I have here if you guys want to take a look at it. It was done in 2013. And I asked Zach when he came in, I said, why do you always recommend an appointed position? And he said, well, the reason why is because a lot of towns don't have the populace to put up somebody who's qualified to run for that position. I showed him Milton does have people that step up all the time, as you can witness here, is here with good intentions on running the town right. So I'll always be for having an elected town treasurer. I mean, it was a study done, and I have it here, back in 2009. It was done by the city, the town of Hingham. And the board of selectmen down the town of Hingham thought, why can't you do it as cheap as Milton does it? Study, because we are the leanest treasurer's office in the state between 20 and 30,000 people. So as employees in the office. And we do have the highest collection rate in the state for real estate taxes. So we do a pretty good job in the town of Milton. That's the reason why I think we should remain. But you're not gonna insult me because I'm a tax collector, I'm Irish, I'm impossible to insult, so make the decision.
Thank you.
That's, well, it goes back to 2009.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. McAuliffe? Mr. Neely?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to reiterate some of the points that have been made here. And that is that when the committee, the Town Government Study Committee, got into all of this and brought in the Department of Revenue with the recommendation of the Board of Selectmen and the school committee, clearly out of the 33 recommendations, one of the important ones was to centralize the financial management. And the fragmentation is something that statewide cities and towns have faced. And the trend, as you've heard tonight, is clearly towards appointing a treasurer to be part of a team. And it's important, and I was a corporate treasurer for many years before I retired, and I was not reporting to the board of directors of the company separately. I reported through the CEO. And that really is the way structures work, is that people get on the team and they all work under the direction of the chief executive officer. And in this case, we're talking about this position reporting to the town administrator. And really, in terms of the compensation and the structure of how the town's financial structure will be, once the position is located within the town administrator's purview, is the opportunity to align the jobs as they are going on and as they vacate over the years. And then certainly when you see the positions being paid higher amounts, in some cases, those positions have multiple responsibilities. So there is the ability to have directors of finance that, for example, a treasurer. So there's different structures that are available to be put together by the town administrator. And in some cases, you can see that the IT department reports to the CFO. So it is true that we have recommended 3 years ago, 4 years ago, that there be an assistant town administrator that would be the CFO. That's a position, I think, down the road that is needed, and the town should go in that direction. In the meantime, our committee recognized the town administrator was the de facto CFO. When we wrote the town administrator legislation and put it before town meeting that was approved and passed, we incorporated financial and budgetary leadership responsibilities into that town administrator's job description. That is something that requires, obviously, an involvement in all financial activities in the town, which would include the treasury activities. So we think it's appropriate here, in this case, to go for an appointed position. And the committee in prior years, your committee in prior years has approved this, and we would ask that you approve that again. Thank you.
So we do currently have a CFO, Amy Dexter.
Mr. Walker?
Just 3 quick final follow-ups.
One is regarding the salary of the position. The question I would pose is, how much are you willing to pay for a position that makes multi-million-dollar decisions on a weekly basis? Would you be willing to pay $10,000 more, $20,000 more for someone whose expertise might save the town millions of dollars at a time? That's the first point. Second point is, when we all love Jim and we all acknowledge the work that he's done over the years. If you go back to the stakeholder slide that I showed, of all of those individuals we talked to, outside auditors, members of the audit committee, school committee, town administrator, every single individual that we talked to said they thought there was more benefit and more advantage for the town to an appointed treasurer than an elected treasurer, except for Jim. Jim disagreed then, and he still holds that position now. And then finally, I would encourage you, you can probably ask Nick to do this, to give you copies of the management letters that resulted from the town audit each year. I go back 12 or 15 years. That'll give you a sense of clearly what they thought the issues were and where they thought the improvements was good. Thank you for your time.
I have a question.
Oh, sure.
And I don't know if this is relevant, but if you are an elected treasurer, can you hold another position outside of that job as treasurer? Like, could you have can you have two sources of income? Like, could you be, so just understanding you said you're in real estate, like, could you be a realtor and a treasurer?
Well, the law says you can't hold two municipal positions.
Correct.
Two public positions.
Right, but you could have
But
a,
you could have two
you could have,
jobs.
Separate private positions.
okay, thank you. Thank you.
all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Question, I'm not sure who to ask. So, clarify the reporting structure?
The proposal would be to report to the town administrator.
So the treasurer would come in and report to Nick versus Amy.
Well, that's Nick can resolve it, they can delegate that as he chooses.
Do you have an answer?
Sure, I can.
Who-
So, let me just do this.
And report to Nick quite frequently.
Yes, no.
Yeah.
And we were working on a trust fund thing last week, and we have a debt issuance next week, and S&P is coming in on Thursday, so I can speak to cooperation, collaboration with Jim, of course. So I think there's two threads here. I think there's the long-term recommendation that Town Government Study Committee put forward, and I think there's kind of how we've tried to work within that kind of structure without necessarily getting there. So I think long-term, what you would see is finance director, CFO, assistant administrator for finance, or some similar title along those lines. A treasurer, a town accountant, an appraiser, and their staffs as well. So kind of how we've structured it in the meantime is we advertise that town accountant finance director role at the salary that we advertise with the job description that we described it as in charge of the financial departments of the town. I think long-term, the intention would be, if that's something we agree is the right solution, is there would have to be an additional employee somewhere within that structure, or change the town's existing organizational chart to kind of move folks around accordingly. I think one thing that I've found since coming here is that a lot of our organizations and departments are flat. So an example, the town accountant's office is the town accountant and then 3 employees who are all at the same level. So maybe in the future, we move that so there's ways and room for folks to progress up. And we're building in succession planning for the long term. So I think there's a lot of conversation to have long term, but I think right now, what would happen in reality is the treasurer would report to the town administrator, and I've kind of delegated that in our structure that we're working with to the town accountant/finance director. If that is helpful, just to try. be as transparent.
How does Amy Dexter fit into this? I mean, I'm confused now.
So she's the town accountant / finance director presently.
Okay.
But
temporary.
Well,
no,
it's
permanently,
a
that's her title.
Okay.
So,
This person, if we appoint somebody, or you hire somebody, would they report to her, or would they be above her?
so I think the goal with setting up her job is that we would get to there at some point. So I think that's still something we're working through. We're structuring it that I'm the appointing authority. Who they report to on a day-to-day basis or a weekly basis might change depending on how we're going.
Whoever you hire, I mean, wherever you hire.
Exactly. So a little bit to be determined, but I think we're trying to have not just myself as on a day-to-day level running the financial department. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Is that I'm providing overall direction, but on the day-to-day level, it would not necessarily reside in my office, although it involves regularly.
I have another question that I don't know if I should maybe have an answer to that. Tell me about the schools, because this sounds like consolidation, more efficiencies, is what I'm hearing. Cooperation, if you will.
We couldn't get more efficient than we are right now.
I don't disagree. However, what are the schools, is there a whole, where are the schools handled
Sure.
within your department here as well?
So the overall town budget, which incorporates the Milton Public Schools, is obviously in terms of developing the budget, doing projections, doing financial forecasting. That scope of work happens on the town side and our side of the house. In terms of managing the school budget, they have Glenn Pavlicek currently serving as their finance director. I don't know his quite title, I should know it, but assistant superintendent for
He's
business
retired.
operations and finance.
Coming back.
So that position is, you'll see that in school districts across the state. That's pretty standard, is the town will have their financial arms and the school will have, superintendent and typically some type of an assistant superintendent for business and finance. The town of Winthrop, I will note, just in the last month posted what they call the CFO and is serving as, and they've identified it as the town and school CFO. That is very unusual, and they were marketing it, especially being about that. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, and see how that works. And it might be a model to look to for a long term. But that is a very unusual setup, just in terms of how things go. There's a lot of work on both sides, so there would need to be people in these roles. But we can look to what other communities are doing in terms of.
And I'm not suggesting that there's.
No, it's a good question, yeah.
People need to, but if you're looking at,
School-
consolidation and working together and all.
School finance is very complicated and niche, and between the federal programs, the state programs, all the reporting requirements. I just think that's a very specific and important set of skills that might always need to be kind of done a little bit separately.
So those are two really important questions. So on the first one, this is whether this individual reports to Nick in the short term, in the absence of a CFO, or to the finance director / town accountant. That's important from a recruitment standpoint because the most qualified individuals would want to report to the town administrator. So you'll have to figure that out. That's a really important question. The second one is important too, on the schools, and the recommendation that we put forward at the time with the CFO structure was that the assistant superintendent for business would have a dotted line reporting relationship to the CFO, to the town CFO. And the superintendent at the time agreed with it. Again, with this structure, I'm not sure that works, but clearly there needs to be, if you have someone who you say is the chief financial officer of the town, they've got to have some relationship with and influence over the schools. It's a separate budget. They have a school committee. They have a bottom line budget. So we know all of those things are true. But in order for this to work, they would have to have some relationship with that individual. So, but again, that was that was predicated on a CFO structure. CFO reports to the town administrator, dotted line relationship from the schools to the CFO. Not sure if that works with the current structure, but important question.
Thank you.
You might have already said this, but just so I understand it. So as an elected position, is there a reporting structure? Like, is there anybody who is quote unquote their boss?
No.
Okay, that's what the people are, but that the way it
job
was.
itself, treasurer, 90% of it is governed by Mass General Law. I mean, it's a fairly structured job.
Mhm.
And they do cooperate with, and you have to cooperate with the department.
You would agree that the answer to her question is no.
Report to,
Do
well,
they
you're
actually-
responsible to the taxpayers, responsible to the, selectmen,
terms of-
responsible to the town
Right,
administrator.
but in terms of the reporting relationship, they don't have the boss. The boss, as you say, is the voters.
Well, reporting, I mean,
Right, I
anybody
get-
that needs any information, just give me a call, email me, or I'm at the desk 7 to 5 every day. Feel free to stop by. You may have to sit outside the office, it's very small.
I see that Judy has her hand up. Judy, do you have a question?
I do, and I seem to be stuck on the compensation of these two different positions. Does our elected town treasurer, and I didn't research this, do they follow in the structure where they have health benefits from the town, pension benefits from the town, which
Yeah.
would be similar to an appointed position where those would be included in your compensation package?
That's, yes, and although you don't get sick days or vacation time,
Oh, I'm on the job all the time.
pretty much, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
I have just one question. I should know this, so I apologize, but I can't remember. With it being an elected position currently, and I know Nick, you mentioned that whether or not it's appointed, the money could be an issue going forward. Have there typically been multiple candidates, or have you often been unopposed? I just can't remember if it's.
When Kevin Seward retired, I ran against, there were about 6 people, and now got to finally, 3 of them dropped out, it was between 3 of us.
Okay, and then since then, has it mostly been unopposed, or are
And it's been
there?
unopposed since then.
Since then, okay. Thank you, that's super helpful.
And a little side note, the 3 of the treasurers, one's name was Babcock, one was Holmes, one was Whittier, the old streets in the town named after them.
You're
So
just.
anybody just want to know what
It's the least we can do.
But then you and Kevin are gonna have to fight for it.
Kevin Seward is on the phone,
They'll get me tonight tomorrow.
All right, any questions? We're gonna lose them soon. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Would we like to have a discussion with regards to the proposed article? I see that Jay has his hand up. Jay?
Yes, hello, I've got some information I'd like to share. Can I share my screen? I've got a bit of a presentation I put together.
Of course. It might
Okay.
take us a second to get it up, but we can do it.
All right,
Jay, do you have that? Oh, yeah, he has it available. Perfect. Last time we didn't do something.
can you see my screen?
I feel so
Look at my nose. Like I look at you and you're like this, and I'm like,
And the nice cursive writing too, which
It's
is
the only way that I
It reminds me of like
have
when
to
I
pay
was a kid.
attention.
no, this looks like a Jackson Pollock.
It's like Dr. Scratch, like you know.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yep. But the
Okay.
is the captain.
It's got a map on one side and Sigourney Weaver on the other side? Okay, so yeah, I'll start out by saying that I am coming into this evening in support of this proposition. I supported it 5 years ago, and at least until I hear the rest of the discussion, I'm supporting it now. I've got a map on the left-hand side of all the towns in Massachusetts that currently elect their treasurer. It's not a whole lot that are inside 495, as you can tell. But that's not what I wanted to get to. What I wanted to say was that one thing I heard a lot 5 years ago when we discussed this previously was that a lot of people say electing a treasurer makes them accountable to the voters. In fact, we just heard 2 people say their boss is the voters. And that takes me to the picture on the right. So I've got a question now. No cheating. Don't look at your phones. I've got a question for everyone in the room.
Oh, what?
What year did the movie Alien come out?
1979.
Who said that?
1979. Don't try.
Who said 1979? That was amazing.
No, get in the room, Sean, do it. I don't know if that was only for the council.
But he's a tech guy, he's an AV guy. Of course he is.
Okay, I can't see the room, but whoever said that, I'm very impressed with your.
20-sided Dungeons and Dragons stuff. It's awesome.
Yes, that is correct. The movie Alien came out in the year 1979. 1979 was also the year that the Saturday Night Fever soundtrack won the Grammy for Album of the Year. It was a big night for the Bee Gees. They won 4 Grammys. They were the big winners that evening. It was also the year that Christopher Reeve made his debut as Superman. And, of course, it was the year that 3 Mile Island had its meltdown. But possibly even more relevant to the discussion we're having right now is that 1979 was the last time anyone in an election challenged an incumbent Milton treasurer. This gets to the question that Emily asked just a couple minutes ago. Does anyone actually run against the incumbent Milton treasurers? Not since 1979. If I can scroll ahead a little bit. I went to the library, did a little bit of research, and looked back to 1940s. I stopped at that point because I just got tired. Just to look at what's been the history of Milton electing its treasurers. From sometime before 1943 to 1963, for over 20 years, we had a Mr. Whittier. He ran unopposed until the end of his tenure, 1960 and 1961.
Clyde Whittier started in 1933.
Oh.
I could not understand any of that.
Clyde Whittier started in 1933.
1933, okay, so we got 30 years there.
30 years.
Okay, both times that he was contested at the end, he won by a landslide. Then we had Graziani running from 1964 to 1977. Never once did anyone run against him. We had Mr. Scanlon, who's only in for 3 years. He was contested in 1979. The incumbent won handily, but then he left the job. Then, as we said, there's Kevin Sorke. Someone said 29 years. My math might be off by a little bit. Let's say more or less 28 or 29 years. Not once did anyone run against him. And then Mr. McAuliffe has been in here 14 years. Again, maybe I'm off by a year or so. Not contested even once. So what does that, when people say the treasurer is accountable to the voters, it's hard to be accountable to the voters if the voters don't get a choice in the elections. So once you get elected treasurer in Milton, you stay there with no one running against you for as long as you want. So if this doesn't pass, and if we have an open election for treasurer this April, and we don't make this change, we better really hope whoever wins that election is really good, because that person we could be stuck with them for 20 years. And I'd say this makes sense because Nick said earlier that making this change will open us up to a broader pool of applicants. And when he said it, I thought it was in the tone of they don't have to be a resident of Milton. But I think it's even more than that of a broader pool of applicants, because right now, who could run for treasurer in Milton? Let's say you're a Milton resident and you're a financial professional and you have a job, but you want to be Milton treasurer. How would that work? Well, you would go to your boss in January and say, boss, I'm going to run in an election 3 months from now. And if I win, I'm quitting the next day because my new job starts the next day. And if I lose, I'm staying here. that's tough. As a financial professional, that's a tough way to run your career. And I can understand why no one, since the release of Pink Floyd's album The Wall, has decided to run their career that way. It's just, it's not a way for a financial professional to act. Whereas if it was a higher position, from time to time, we'd be looking for people. Those people could apply for the job, they'd get it or they wouldn't. And you know, that's how people run their career. So that's the main thing I wanted to say. Also, you know, again, on the idea of being accountable to the voters, as Mr. Walker said earlier, how are they accountable to voters if we don't know what the treasurer is doing? I think the treasurer is doing a good job, but I don't know. I'm just a voter. I don't know what the treasurer does. I'd much rather have the treasurer report to a boss who is down the hall from them and knows what they do every day, knows that they're doing a good job, can set up annual reviews, can set up goals and timelines for them and know if they meet those goals or not. That seems more like what a financial professional should be doing. And I'll end this with just one more slide. I started with the slide of all the towns that had an elected treasurer. Well, this is a map with both sorts of towns. All the towns with elected treasurer and all the towns with appointed treasurer. And certainly, just because everyone else is doing it isn't a reason we need to do it, but certainly makes you think that it might be a good idea. So I will stop sharing at this point and look forward to the discussion.
Thanks, Jay.
Thanks, Jay.
Judy, is your hand back up again? Judy?
Can you reach the
Judy, you are recognized. Judy, we think you might be.
Sorry, I'm good now. I'm good now. To Jay's point about his great presentation of our town treasurers seem to have longevity of service in that position. And it appears that they're not, the voters don't notice what they're doing, but from Mr. McCullough's presentation, he has data that shows Milton is one of the higher achieving towns in tax collection. So there is data to be observed from this elected position if anyone really wants to pursue it and find it. So it may not be direct accountability to the voters where we all run down, hey, what's Jim doing or Kevin doing? We would have a resource of what they are doing because he has to have reports. So or the elected position would have to have reports. If you really wanted to, you could go roaming through those reports to get an idea of how well an elected official would be functioning in that position. Just a thought after seeing your great presentation, Jay. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy.
I like the idea of an elected official. I feel like they're, you know, all of the points that were made, but also to almost to what Judy was saying, I don't want to have to go do that. Like, I don't, that's like a line of business that's like, it's so in the weeds that that's a bigger part of town government that I think there should be a framework for it. There should be a structure for it. There should be a reporting structure. And I'm just having a very hard time wrapping my head around sort of, I just keep picturing something here and then sort of a satellite over here. And not that it implies that there isn't cooperation, but it's not inherent in the structure. And it's not, I don't know, the accountability piece just feels, there is not as much to me. And it just makes a lot of sense from an efficiency standpoint in the way that you run. I mean, it's a town business, and the way that you would run a business is that would be part of the reporting structure, so.
Another thing, we do get audited every year, and last year we did have an unqualified opinion, it was the highest opinion you could have in audit. And this county is run very well.
I think that's a testament to you. That's the only, we need to clone the people that have been here in the past that have done an amazing job, and I think that's the concern would be, what if we don't get a you?
Right.
I mean, what's your,
Appointed treasurers too, a lot of them, they'll bounce from town to town, whoever's paying the highest amount of money is where they're gonna go, especially for the last 3 years, so that you can get the highest pension. Appointed treasurers don't stick around long.
that's,
And if you go on the MMA website, on Mass Treasurer's website, there's 30 jobs out there.
Yeah.
Anybody wants them. And a lot of them pay a lot more than the town of Milton is paying right now. And they're vacant. They've been vacant for a while.
I'd be curious to see that data of somebody who is an elected versus an appointed, how long they stay.
Yeah.
Because that's something.
Yeah, if you go onto the Mass Treasurer's website, they'll show treasurers that left the position and treasurers that moved on to another position. You connect the dots. I mean, they go from a smaller town to a bigger town to a bigger town to a bigger town.
So I just have a comment. We've got probably a new school in front of us, 2 more fire stations, 1 we're already funding. There's a huge amount of financial funding that's going to need to be done, a lot of bonds and things. And I think if we hire a professional to do the job, to appoint somebody that actually does that for a living, I think we have a lot better chance of getting through this, as opposed to electing somebody that maybe have some accounting experience and maybe some treasury experience, but I think we could find a much, much better candidate that has all those different experiences that we need if we hire somebody and appoint them as opposed to elect them. I just think it opens up so much more opportunity. I mean, even if we gotta pay somebody $152,000 was the highest I heard, that we're talking tens of millions of dollars we're gonna spend, hundreds of millions of dollars we're gonna spend over the next few years on all these new infrastructure things in town. It's short money.
Yeah, but the highest in Marshfield, we pay $160,000.
I agree with Steve.
You look like you want to say something.
Yeah, I agree with Steve.
All right.
That's it.
I think I agree with Steve too. I think, and a lot of what's being said, I think maybe this goes back to the issue of like elected positions really working well when it's policy, and that this isn't policy. And I think we have been really fortunate. So this isn't about who's been in the role in the past.
Agreed.
But sometimes you're just lucky and you can't rely on that going forward. Because and the reason why I didn't know if it had been competitive, I suspected it hadn't been a competitive race, because when there are multiple candidates, I know as a voter, and I don't know about all of you, but like I looked them up. When there's one person every year, I don't bother, honestly, because there isn't a choice. So even if I don't agree with what they're doing, there's no alternative, because unless there's a really coordinated campaign for a write-in, like write-ins don't change anything. So I think that accountability piece, again, we've been lucky, and this isn't about what's happened in the past, but I don't really think and Jay really demonstrated that once someone's in, there isn't the accountability piece, because it's not a competitive position. So I think, that's just more to say I agree with what I'm hearing around the table.
Wheels are spinning, Tom. Out with it.
No, this is a difficult decision, I think. There's a lot at stake here. I think for all the points that everyone's brought up. I've noticed Steve's most recent comments, I think. Jim McAuliffe, the treasurer, has done a phenomenal job for this town, as has the predecessors before him. Found the office obviously very helpful. I think the local touch is great. And I do like the independence of the office. I mean, that treasurer is gonna run every year. You ever try to get rid of an employee for not doing a good job? They don't voluntarily leave. So, I don't know, I've been weighing all of these things, and, you know, as I stated in the prior meeting, I am very concerned about the future, of Milton and the spending and, you know, the projects that we're looking at in our revenue stream. So, you know, not so much, just to maybe kind of my ideas and some of the points that were raised here, you know, it's, is I do like the independence of the office. I think that is a good thing. But
Can I ask you why? I guess that's where in other positions, I can understand the idea of independence. I'm not understanding the need for independence in a treasurer's role.
well, a lot of it is driven by statute, like James says, I have looked up some of the things, so a lot of the stuff is you have to do it to comply, so it's
Right.
not really. But I think what I'm thinking was, that idea and statement came from, I think, the conversation here by some of the panelists. about
Right.
Expanding the roles and CFOs and everything else, we have this structure, we have the town administrator also involved. So I just think that maybe the standalone and allow them to do their statutory job is the best thing. But like I said, that's just one point.
Right.
Because there's so much more there.
Right.
You know, in terms of bonds and everything else. So, you know, that's what I'm weighing.
Yeah, no, and I wasn't arguing with you. I
Oh,
just
no,
didn't
I-
understand I don't understand the independence point on this particular role, I guess.
I think more I think from so maybe combine really two statements. It's just really that they are answering to voters every year.
Mhm.
You know, they are doing that.
Yeah.
You know, they can't individually be removed from office. You know, someone else has to step up. And that is, I think, a big concern too. Who steps up?
Yeah.
You know.
Just add also, when you're a treasurer, they do have a school every year you have to attend, and after you attend it so many years, you sit for the tests. And right now, I am a certified Mass Municipal Collector and Mass Municipal Treasurer. I've passed all the tests, I've gone to the schools, I mean, and I'd encourage any treasurer that comes in to go to school every year, to keep up your credentials and I mean, when you go to school too, you also meet the other treasurers, see how they're doing, see what works for them. I mean, with treasurers too, if you have a question, you call any treasurer in the state, they will drop whatever they're doing and they will help you out. I mean, there's only 351 of us in the state.
Any other questions? Hearing none. Is there a motion on the floor?
A motion to accept the proposition.
Is there a second?
Second.
By Steve. Madam Secretary, would you conduct the roll call vote, please?
All right, Jay,
Yes.
Steve Rhines,
Yes.
Judy,
No.
Amanda,
Yes.
Jareen,
Yes.
Allison,
Yes.
Lori,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Lorraine,
Yes.
Kristen,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
JJ,
Yes.
and I am a yes. And Dave,
I'm going to abstain. Thank you. As is mine. Have it. So the motion carries, the yeses have it, and that will be the recommendation of the Warrant Committee to the special town meeting. Thank you all for coming to us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Can I just say one more thing?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, now that the vote has been taken, the warrant committee comment is critical. So happy to help in any way that I can.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm sorry?
Sign the comment, there are takers while it's fresh.
Yeah, I mean, right. I tell you what, we'll get to that. It's on our agenda to deal with town meeting issues. Let's go back to Article 3, which was the school. Okay, so we'll reopen that discussion now. We'd had a lengthy conversation on that on Monday. One of the things that we did was we kicked it to tonight to give ourselves more time to get an update. We've got an update. We don't have, a number. What are our thoughts on that? The options that we have is to continue the conversation, to vote. We have one more scheduled warrant committee meeting before our comments are due, which is next Wednesday.
And is that when the select board is meeting? So would there really be any new information between now and then?
Maybe. Nick, it's our understanding that you're in the middle of the negotiations now. It is possible that prior to, if we were to convene at 7 o'clock next Wednesday, we could have a number.
Yes, I think the logistics that we face now is that the select board is meeting that same night, so this is something that we could possibly convene urgently before then if we needed to. But we're waiting feedback from the sisters, and once we have something, we'll report it to the select board, and if it's at a place that we can share it, we will do so immediately. So as soon as we're able to get something out there publicly, we'll share that information.
I have a question in regards to the article. Can I ask why the term eminent domains in the article?
Sure, that's the land acquisition articles that the town has used previously. It was copied and pasted, but the only change is changing the different locations. Like the last land acquisition the town did in terms of the purchase was for 432 Abbott Street for the East Milton Fire Station. That's the same article, copied and pasted with the address changed. So it's the point of the articles is to give a broad subject for any potential votes and discussion at town meeting. So that's the context. If the warrant committee has concern with that phrasing in there, we can certainly go back to the select board and go back to town council to inquire if it's necessary. But that's the genesis of the article.
Sure. Go ahead. No, go ahead. Your hand was up. Is there, so if you think about an understanding, like numbers can't be put in, like prior to there being a deal, right? So an appraisal is being done. Are there, I guess, guidelines within the town on if something is valued at X, you could only go within this range of, like, price. So say something was worth $8 million and appraised at $8 million. Is there anything within the town? Is there anything in there that says you, when doing something like this, you can only go up 20% or, above the appraised value? Do you know what I mean? I assume not, but just is there, as we're thinking about like this, the comment blank check was used before, is there anything inherent in the structure and the way that business is done that wouldn't even allow that? Does that make sense?
Under procurement law for cities and towns, for towns I should say, actually cities is slightly different. So for us to buy land, we have to post it publicly. The main way for us to buy land is for us to issue a request for proposals. Property owners respond to that proposal with the proposal. the town would then, in terms of doing good business, conduct an appraisal. There's nothing, to my knowledge, to prevent the town from overpaying for property. It's a public process, it's a public proposal. If you responded to the proposal for clean 5 acres of land instead of $20 million, sure, the town, if, you know, not necessarily saying it's good business, but
Right.
I don't think legally there's a restriction on that piece of it. So the appraisal is more just so that there's a comfort level that what we're paying for is fair market value. In terms of what's publicly out there about this transaction is, as I indicated in the last meeting, it was listed at $8.5 million.
Right.
When the Sisters of St. Joseph responded to our RFP, that was a public document, and they submitted a proposal at $7.5 million with conditions. So now it's a question of where is the town going to land in relation to the proposed purchase price and proposed conditions.
Okay, thank you.
So that's kind of
That's helpful.
ballpark, I think.
Steve?
So I'm in the same boat as I was on Monday. I don't feel comfortable saying yes to something that I don't know a dollar value, what the remediation cost potentially could be. And I think it's bad business to do that.
Now, will we get approval for, like, will we be discussing the development if we agree to this, let's say whatever it comes out to? So if we agree to buy Fonbon, my concern is the cost of the construction. Additionally, we still have a need to develop Pierce, or there's going to be that. So my thought is we need to be concerned with the taxpayers. We're in an inflation where we have many people posting online even about groceries. I mean, this is like the reality of where we're at. So to see these costs adding up, my concern is not only just buying it for 8.5, it's the development, and then still coming back and saying, well, we have an overcrowding in Pierce. What are we doing about that? Oh, let's go back to, you know, other avenues that we've gone down before. So unless we are creating a solution with that construction and additionally to Pierce at that same time, which would make the most sense to me, are we, where are we at with, you know, making sure that that all gets accomplished? So that's fine.
Okay.
I also don't, I mean, I feel like what we said the other night is, you know, this may take the burden off the younger grades, but it's not addressing, you know, kind of what I see is the most overcrowded age group, which is, you know, like my daughter in 6th grade. I'm a single parent, like, it's very expensive right now, you know, and I think I talk to patients, they're elderly, like their medications are expensive, they can't afford medication. So I think going to people once for an override, maybe it passes. If we're coming back a second time, like, I don't see that. So I think if this is like step one, maybe that override passes, but I don't know if we'll get a second shot at this. So I worry if this is like kind of just like plugging the hole, we may not be able to, like, as we were saying, like, that just, people maybe can't afford it. So I don't know, that's kind of where I'm at.
To back Kristen too in that, I'm okay agreeing to Fonbon if we're going to do an addition on Pierce. But if you're going to come back and look to build a school after this I think you're asking these taxpayers to.
I think it's too much.
That's too much. It's just like, I mean, you can't, so I would have to know that construction wise, we would be doing that elementary study. I don't know why that we wouldn't be proposing that at the same time we would do Fonbon, because that addresses all of our issues.
I agree with you.
Yeah, thank
you. The thing that concerns me is that the tail on the debt, it goes from $75 to $100 per family or per home
Just
for
for
20 plus years. And you look at the amortization of all these other debts that are out there, fire stations taking on that debt service for all that. That is a rising concern for me personally too. I know we chatted about this as well. We need to plan efficiently on this, I think. That's what you're saying.
I have a question. So, or just a point, and I'm not disagreeing. I think the difficulty is there isn't an alternative before us. So, you know, I know that they're talking about the parallel paths. They're talking about continuing with Guile Road, continuing with this until one until one can't, until one rises to be it. I mean, it seems like ideally if Guile Road could happen, that seems like it's answering all the questions, but there's been a lot that won't allow it to happen. I think about the point that Sean brought up the other day, which the fact that there's actually a parcel of land for Milton to purchase is crazy. But if we're buying it,
But I
But
guess
that
the
we're
question
saying-
is, do they bring back the construction costs? Does that come back to us?
I don't know that that's going to be there. But is that going to?
Yeah.
Are we going to know that before we have to? Before that's
I think that's,
the question for us now, like
Right,
with this article, is buy the property.
right.
And so then, and part of our process with regards to whether we want to buy the property is we have the best estimates that we can get at this time.
Right.
Because again, we're running. These negotiations are happening in real time. Ideally, we wouldn't be, 8 days from our deadline or whatever it is, right? But, so they're working with the numbers that they have, so we're back in the envelope to some degree on what the expectations of the overall would be. But the question before us in this article is buy the land.
Right.
And then it would be on the ballot for the, annual town meeting.
Right, because it would have to be the money and the question of the debt exclusion.
And then later would come the cost, and that would be an override.
So in terms of sequencing, so it would be special town meeting in February to approve purchase of the land and the dollar value of it, and that would be a debt exclusion. April town election, vote on whether or not to approve the debt exclusion. And then a May town meeting, the warrant articles that Mr. Zulus and Mr. O'Rourke referenced last meeting about having some Guile Road articles as placeholders and seeing where those go. But in addition to that would be a proposed article to appropriate additional funds to the school building committee to conduct the study and design of a facility at Fontbonne. That again would need town meeting approval. And that would only get you to a design stage. And then it would come back if the design is complete. And this is the path the fire station project followed as well. There was design money appropriated. Then the full construction project would be brought back to town meeting for approval. And that would likely also be a debt exclusion, so also a ballot question. So as you can see, there's gonna be additional approvals down the road for each kind of phase of the project. And that would track with the fire station actually pretty closely as to what their process was. It was design in 2019, approval for construction in 2021.
so, yeah, I think Kristen made a really good point. Jay, if this goes through and passes and the voters approve it and we get the override and then we bought the land, well, then we look at renovating the building, and I'm not sure how much that would cost, but let's say the estimate comes in higher than we expect, or for whatever reason, we're going to have to do another override to renovate the building and make it useful. And if that first override passes and the second override doesn't pass, then we bought the land and we bought an empty building and we can't use it. So that brings me back to one thing. I was thinking after this last meeting, I was sort of walking away mystified, thinking, we don't really know. Do we have an estimate for a timeline? Like we say, well, we compare this to the John Road option, it's fast. But can we have some estimate of, is it a year from September? Is it when? 2 years from September? And can we have some estimate of the money? I mean, maybe that will have to wait. Sorry if I'm rambling a bit. I know we're doing an inspection now. I don't know if the inspection is going to tell us, is it full of asbestos? Is it full of lead paint? I think that's going to probably have a big influence on the cost. But I feel a lot better voting for this, let's call it $8 million to buy the land, if we had some sense of, here's the timeline. It'll be ready in September of this year. And here's big picture of what we think it'll cost. I don't even know if that answer would change my vote. Maybe I'll vote yes, no matter what you say. But I'd certainly sleep better if I knew, yeah, you told us when it'll be ready, as opposed to, it'll be ready sometime. It'll be faster than the Jaw Road option. So that's all.
Thank you. I apologize. I was presenting to the school committee in you guys had fueling meetings at the same time, so I apologize about that. In regards to the timeline for the school, that's partially why we're hiring DRA to look at this, to do it. We know there's, essentially gonna be comparisons from this project against the Our Road project. And mainly, we can confidently say that, it will be done faster. Exactly how much faster? There are too many boxes to check before we can start construction, right? So we have to get all the votes in line. Once we get the votes in line to actually just acquire the property, there's additional funding for design and architectural services that also have to pass a vote. So, if we green light all of those, we can start thinking of what that construction timeline looks like. But at this point right now, I couldn't answer that.
Cost-wise, though, wouldn't it make the most sense if we're buying materials to look at if we have an overcrowding at Pierce, to Kristen's point, to do that same project and do one override that addresses the Pierce Middle School as well as building out this swamp pond?
And that could be, so with Fompon, once we acquire that and know that's a tangible option that we can do.
Yeah.
That is something that's part of, once we bring the architects and engineers on, we can put that as part of their scope that they're doing.
Okay, because that would, I think, make a lot of, for me, my decision-making and going forward with Fompon and a quicker timeline and addressing the crowding at Pierce rather than the long-term, obviously they're going to be compared as what you just said.
Yep.
So I think that fulfills the need for where we're at. And cost-wise, because if you do Fompon to that point of doing overrides and then still say we have an issue and we need to go and build a school, another middle school, well, then here we are at multiple overrides and cost-wise that these taxpayers cannot, incur.
If you get all the votes, how long would it take from there? Can you tell us that?
I'm trying to think of it because we'd be renovating the space. My guess would be about 3 years.
3 years?
Yeah. If you're asking me right now for a timeline, I know you guys appreciate just, overall communication. My guess would be about 3 years. After we get the project, the design is done, you break ground or start construction, 2 to 3 years, somewhere in that time frame.
And Guile Road, if you got all the votes?
Seven.
So we've got Gow Road lined up after all the approvals are done, starting from scratch. My goal is for
4 years.
4 years.
Oh.
Isn't Guile Road more than votes? Isn't that, there's still legal
Exactly.
issues that we have to deal with?
I'm just
Yeah.
trying to get, if you were
Oh,
just
I
starting
know,
from
but
construction.
if you got
But
a legal problem that you have to go.
No, I get it. That's why,
Yes.
again, someone said bird in the hands or two in the, or whatever it is.
I think that's weighing really heavily on my mind too, because that project sounds like it would resolve more of our problems, but what if we didn't get Fompon and then there's a legal issue there that's insurmountable and we have nothing, and we have problems at like every level almost right now, other than the high school it seems like, and what if we end up with nothing?
I think we should buy the land no matter what, and even
Yeah.
if it doesn't get renovated, it's
Right.
still an investment. Obviously, you could flip that and make money off of it. Bottom line, my concern, again, it will come back to the fact that we still have issues. We need to address the Pierce issue. We can't endure all this cost.
My biggest concern about trying to acquire a fund bond is how much lead's there, how much asbestos is there, how much remediation needs to be done to the soil. And we could be buying a dinosaur basically for $8 million that you're gonna have to put another 20 just to remediate it. We don't know. That building's been there for a long time. Guaranteed it's got lead paint in it. Guaranteed there's asbestos in it based on the age of it. I don't know what else is wrong with it. I haven't walked through it or anything, so I don't know. I would hope we would at least do some minimal inspection before we signed a purchase and sales agreement, or we had the legal words in there that we have an opportunity to back out of it if we run into this huge remediation. It's like we bought the piece of land down by the harbor. We don't even, and all that soil there is all needs to be remediated someday if somebody wants to build on it, because it's all full of oil and grease and things from the boatyard there. So I just think we're running at something and not doing the right diligence to get there before we just go and write a check for $8 million. So I worry about that.
So, yeah, sorry, so just one other to your point, one of the clarifications on the feasibility study, they're not doing hazmat analysis of it.
They are.
They're not.
Okay.
They're not, mainly due to the timing of it right now. We've got them on board now. I actually have a meeting with them tomorrow morning. But we're asking them to do all this within a 4 to 6 week window. They can't do a full hazmat analysis on there. You know, the intention for that, like I gave the presentation on Monday, is it's a level 3 alteration. They'll be gutting everything that's in there.
Judy, your hand is up.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave. I have a question, as sort of a add-on to what I'm learning about buying phone bond. I didn't fully understand debt exclusion, and I'm just gonna make a silly example, and if, Mr. Milano can correct me if I understood this properly. So, we buy it, debt exclusion passes, and my particular property gets assessed $10 per year for 20 years. Is that a flat rate throughout the town, or like we have 100 properties that can be assessed at $10 each? Or how do you come to the point the debt exclusion, let's just pretend it's $100. We have 100 properties in town to levy this assessment to. So everyone gets a $1 increase in their tax. Is that how I see debt exclusion? Or is it on a sliding scale of how we have taxes now? So much per 1,000 for each property. So in other words, is it flat or sort of sliding, if you can understand what I'm trying to say?
No, I do. So it is the latter. It's more sliding. So what would happen is the amount of debt service would be added to the town's overall tax levy, which will then be used to come up with the town's tax rate. And then, so each household, based on their valuation, would pay a different amount. And when I use the numbers between $75 and $100 a year, that is based on the average single-family house, which is valued at over $900,000. So it would be less for houses below that valuation, more for houses above that valuation. So it's just a component of how we get to our tax rate at the end of the day. It would be a similar exercise if there was an operating override, or a similar exercise when it comes time to approve the project in its full, and say it's a $35, $50 million project. We would do the math out and be able to provide an analysis of what that might mean for different houses at different valuations for what the tax rate and tax implications would be long term. So it's a sliding scale because it all just goes into the tax rate that is developed for the town for all taxpayers. Everybody pays something slightly different based on your valuation.
Thank you. Just a quick follow-up. So we sort of do this for 20 years. And so at the end, we've reached 20 years. Is there a way taxpayers can see if their tax rate went down because they no longer have that increase because the 20 years has been fulfilled?
I know.
So typically the levy will increase each year by what we're allowed to increase it under Prop 2.5. So it would just mean in the year where the taxes roll off, the increase will be slightly less than that full 2.5% because some figure falls off. This project won't be as noticeable because it's a smaller amount. Something like a school project, when that rolls off, folks might notice it that the taxes didn't feel to go up as much as they do from year to year.
That the fire station got approved, right? So it never fell out.
The stabilization, there's a stabilization fund
That is a very different setup, and it's a lot more confusing. I'm happy to talk about it if you would like to, but it's a little tricky. Those were approved as debt exclusions, and then the town approved kind of special legislation to actually lock them into place. So those are not rolling off like they might have otherwise if the town didn't approve that special legislation.
Is it only for those two specific projects?
Correct.
Okay, so if we do the 8.5,
This is a
And
new
then it's
way,
gonna
yep,
fall off, it will fall off in
Yep.
20 years.
This would be a
unless another
traditional-
early amendment comes.
exactly. This is a traditional debt exclusion, so it will roll off after it's fully paid off, if the bond is fully paid off.
And can you talk about the fire station project? So there was the plan with the school and library money,
Mhm.
that it would fund like 2.3 million,
Yep.
it wasn't the minutes of the fire station. What is the total on the fire station?
So the way,
Three or the one?
No, so I don't know, Nick, no, 50 is the maximum they could take in early.
so there's a few different components here. So a few years ago, the town approved what was referred to colloquially as the Hurley Amendment. So that was, it was taking all of the town's debt service payments associated with the prior school and library projects as of fiscal year 2018, and that would be locked in on the tax rolls. So unlike a traditional debt exclusion, they wouldn't roll off once they are fully paid off. Instead, the town would continue to tax at that level as of fiscal 2018, take that money, put it into a special fund. The money in that special fund, per the special legislation, was only allowed to be used for future debt associated with fire station projects or DPW yard projects. And the cap was, the principal on those projects could not be more than $50 million. So essentially there's two caps. There's a cap on the project principal, the projects of the fire station and the DPW can't exceed $50 million in totality. But there's a second cap that you have $2,329,000, which is the fiscal 2018 assessment, that your debt service, the intention would not to have your debt service be above that, because the explanation to voters was that we would, keep it at that level to pay for these projects. So there wouldn't be and need to be future tax increases related to those projects, because we're gonna put money aside to pay for them later. So that's how that is set up. It's pretty unique. That's why it requires special legislation.
So will we not see any other tax increases related to any of the three fire stations?
That's the intention.
Okay.
If the projects cost more than $50 million, or they cost more than they're supposed to earlier, so it's, if everything stays within that early amendment schedule and prediction, then the intention was it would stay. Yep.
And
If it does, I quit.
I was gonna say, do you have any idea
I'm
what it looks like now?
So we've only bid the first station, which is headquarters, which is being built. The committee has voted to move to East Milton next, because we're acquiring the land. I think the committee's looking at it next year.
Oh, wow, that was moved up a lot.
Yeah, well, purchasing the land versus rehabbing an existing building, as you're seeing, way on the other, made a big difference in this. And then I don't know what the window is going to be, both for the windows timeline and second for numbers for Athens, but Athens will be third.
And so that's part of actually what the treasurer and Amy and I have been working on together, has been looking at when East Milton would fit within the parameters that we've laid out in terms of the debt service staying in the fund being sufficient to pay for it all. So it's part of the timing of the fire station projects.
Thank you.
I have a general question, we have this timeline, and a lot of our concern is just about this artificial deadline that we have about the common, right? As a practical matter, though, your office to town is already vested with the authority to sign a PNS on our behalf, is that correct?
The select board can enter into purchase and sale agreements, but they would have to be contingent upon.
Contingent upon.
Yep.
So a lot of our concern is self-imposed. Like, we can continue to meet following the creation of the warrant regularly, repetitively, if we have to, right? Because we're not holding you up from entering into a PNS contingent upon.
Yeah, the real true deadline is to have something ready for town meeting. And to have, so that town meeting members and yourselves can know what they're voting on.
Right.
So we can vote, but having it in the warrant is certainly ideal.
Right, but this may be out of our hands. And if we were to continue to meet, it would all be on the public record. They'd have Milton Access Television, could watch our deliberations, the podcasts are available out there. It'd be of record.
And we would be able to work together to distribute, once the warrant committee did, have a vote and have a comment that it was ready for, we could work together, to distribute that broadly to everybody.
Okay.
I got one more.
JJ.
Just to speak to, like, if we find asbestos or like paint in the building, does it make sense then, if it's really bad, to just wreck the building at some point and just start from scratch? Would that be an option?
That's obviously always an option. I think
Not
that's
the
something
most
that,
costly.
for me, we would tend to weigh on the architect's input on that. What's the cost of renovating it? What we're looking at is square footage costs right now for new construction against renovation, right? And if you're doing renovation, you're encountering, as you're talking about, asbestos and stuff like that, that's bumping that number up. That's where you're gonna compare the two and say, yeah, maybe it is better.
So I guess just to speak to that, like, worst case scenario, if you had to wreck the building, just based with your experience, like, how much would that cost to turn it into land, basically, to start from scratch?
That I couldn't answer right now. Yeah.
Judy, I see your hand.
Thank you, Dave. To be clear, just to help me out, Mr. Milano, the actual debt exclusion for this particular project, will this be a fall off or just a reduction after 20 years?
So
A true fall off?
any payments associated with this project will fall off the tax rolls after the last payment is paid, so it'll fall off at the end.
Thank you very much.
Okay. What's our sense? Is our sense that we want to go to a vote tonight on the merit of the article and up or down, yes or no? Do we want to continue the matter to a future date that we could hopefully have a firm number that we could work with? It seems to me it's more of the sense that we would want to continue.
And that firm number, would that be, are we talking, would the firm number be the purchase price? It would not, we wouldn't have any numbers around anything beyond the purchase price.
Well, I think we would have to go to Mr. O'Rourke's presentation of what those, what those estimations were in the $30 million.
So yeah, in 2019, when DRA did their study for the construction of a brand new early education center, I think it was around high 39, 40 million.
Okay.
But again, that was for, I think the concept that they presented at that one is joining it on the backside of the high school. So it was building it there, so there's no cost associated with acquiring land as part of that too.
Okay.
And take into account it was 2019
Yes.
dollars.
Noted.
Right? So this would be the first step in this process. Okay. We might have to adjust our date because like right now we've scheduled next Wednesday. It might have to go into Thursday. The comments due on Friday. Maybe what we can do is for purposes of right now, we'll just leave it on Wednesday. We have a date, but we might need to make an adjustment on that. So please note that please do your best to keep your schedules open, and then we'll have to do it on the move. Okay, thank you. All right, so that concludes our discussion of that article. And it's getting on 9. The only other remaining business that we sort of had that we talked about discussions of our preparations for the annual town meeting and subcommittees. We still don't have the budget. We will be getting that soon, one would hope. I know that some people have been going to the school budget subcommittee meeting, so that's hugely important. So we sort of have an idea what's coming our way on that, starting to work on that. You know, people had I had asked for solicitations of people, what you wanted to be on your budget subcommittee. And so basically, especially schools have already sort of been assembled. Emily is going to be the chair of that. Basically, and I'll reach out to people sort of on a one-on-one with the emails. If you asked for a subcommittee, you're on it. Okay. And I'll probably create some kind of a spreadsheet or something like that. But just for purposes of people are asking, like, what committees am I on? You're on the ones you wanted to be on. You know, there's a couple other ones that are floating around, so I'm likely to pick up the ones that nobody volunteered for, right? Mm-hmm. And, you know, I may come to you with a request, okay? You know? And so basically, we'll go with it like that. If you ask to be on a committee, if you showed any interest, you're on it. You know, we'll close the loop on that and make it official. It would be helpful to actually have a budget, though.
Mm-hmm. And to the
Yes,
newer
totally.
members, like, do you guys have questions about how we do the subcommittees and stuff?
Went to school the other day.
Yeah, and then I think when it got closer, we would meet if it's more, if you have like your own, you're working on library, there's a few people, so that would have to be posted as a public meeting, and you have minutes, and then if it's a smaller thing, I know someone last year did a few smaller things, and she was the only one on the committee, so you don't have to post that publicly, right?
Or did we get clarification?
Yeah,
That was new last year, right? That we had to post, and then I feel like there was some question as to.
We're going to see clarification on that, because after the fact, we found that some of our meetings that we had gone through, you know, the process to have open meetings, so we're Zooming and it's all open, was not necessary, which is helpful. It's nice. Like we got clarification on our open meeting rule with regards to our quorum when we're hybrid Zoom. Is that before we were operating under the guidance that we had to have quorum in the room, but now it looks like we can have quorum. So it's helpful it just makes it easier not to have to schedule, you know, the Zoom, you know, so we'll get more clarification on that. But so essentially, yeah, you meet in your subcommittee, you review the budget, and then you reach out to the principals, the department heads, go over it, ask them their questions, and then be prepared to write the comment in the warrant article, you know, giving the explanation.
For the school budget, when's that coming due?
I'm sorry?
For the school budget?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, when's that one due?
Well, it will be the same, and yeah, right, in the school budget comment, it's a major undertaking.
Yeah.
It's all just due like when the warrant closes.
Oh, that's
the special.
Oh,
So
yeah.
that's a totally separate deadline than this.
Okay.
Because I was just going to add, if it's okay, for school budget, I know I've seen many of you at the school finance subcommittee meetings in the mornings, but not everyone who was interested in being on the school subcommittee could attend those. So now I know at the last meeting, Glenn was talking about getting those, because they're getting the budget approved, that they're getting the binders ready. Those of you who've been on here before, nice weekend of light reading. So I think we kind of need that for the,
for sure,
kind of the meeting between the
that would help.
warrant committee, subcommittee, and finance from schools. So I'm gonna work with Betty to try to, and then we'll coordinate on scheduling, because the sense I got was we probably need one evening meeting, because of some scheduling on our side, to make sure everyone can attend, because I know that 8:30 is tough.
So to your point about our subcommittees, are all of those subcommittees filmed, do you know? Like, so the budget one yesterday, was that?
That wasn't filmed. No,
Yeah,
that's a sub, but
Yeah.
but it's open that anyone can
It's
attend.
open, but right, but yeah.
Yeah, so the school finance, like, we're attending it, but it's an open meeting I
Right.
check when because I don't think they had one the first week back because of the superintendent search. They typically have them every Tuesday morning, but you can see under the school committee agendas, you'll see them posted because they're open meetings. So, yeah, so anyone can attend, but they don't film those ones.
Okay.
Thank you all. Is there anything else? Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Is it seconded?
Second.
Does anyone oppose it? Carries unanimously. Thank you. We're adjourned.
Thank you.